8 people buried in debt and out of options. Netflix goes another level. The boundaries are insane, and people will suffer it all just for money, which can change their lives forever, only if they escape and survive.
How come? My God, I just get 50 grand.
She was playing for $500 million a day.
Oh, shit.
This is so much fun, isn't it? Oh, God.
The story begins with a broke young man whose life in debt has exhausted him. He stays on a high bridge, wondering if the ground is ready for a surprise visitor. Just then, a massive amount of money was deposited into his account, along with an offer to buy back the time he thought he'd lost. If he agreed, he needed to get into a car. A few minutes later, the car stopped, and Jin-Soo slowly walked into a hall, noticing a table with cash, an envelope, and several cards. Inside the envelope was a welcome letter to the Game of 8. It stated that no knowledge or skills would be required, only time. With each passing day, the final prize would only grow larger. However, if one of the participants died, the entire prize would be reset to 0, which means they can push the limits of pain so hard.
I just don't know what to do. Oh God, what if they're organ harvesters or something? This looks to me like easy money.
Only without crossing the line of kill. Believing it to be some sort of prank for a TV show, the man grabbed the stacks of money. But just then, he received a text with a reminder of his miserable salary. Feeling tempted by easy money and hating regular work, he decides to take the risk, grabs the card, and steps behind the curtain. Inside was a massive room with a 24-hour timer. The door immediately shut behind him. Jin-Soo noticed a strange staircase and thought he should head up to the 3rd floor. The entrance had a lock that opened with the card. Inside, he found a set of rules and a new set of clothes. The display board showed the accumulated cash prize, which currently stood at 0. Food and drinks were free, but for everything else, he'd need to use his phone, and the cost would be deducted from the prize at a special rate.
What's a special rate?
Any items outside the room would be placed beside the square. Leaving the room was forbidden from midnight until 8 a.m. Breaking the rules would result in a 50% deduction from the prize. After putting on the clothes, Jin-Soo received 60,000 won. Another minute later, the amount of money increased. He realized that every minute was worth 30,000 won. If he stayed the entire 24 hours, he would earn 43 million won. However, to pay off his debt, he'd have to survive for the next 2 weeks. The urge to use the bathroom was unbearable, but leaving the room wasn't an option. He barely held himself together and thought about ordering a blanket with a heater. But the prices were insanely high.
No, hold on. That can't be right. Wait, no, cancel?
Judging by the cost of newspapers, he realized that everything in this room was priced 100 times higher than in normal life. Being an experienced penny pincher with crafty hands, he ordered used newspapers and boxes, turning them into a handmade bed. The next day, Jin-Soo met the other players. For some reason, the 24-hour timer increased. The 7th player suspected that there were hidden rules they hadn't discovered yet, which caused the timer to rise. Everything around them was a complete fabrication.
It's all plastic. Nothing here is real.
The 1st player, unable to move quickly, suggested they introduce themselves by name, but the 2nd player disagreed, proposing they refer to each other by their numbers. The 7th speculated that purchasing items in the square might be cheaper, most likely due to group buying. The 4th feared that prices here might be even higher. Just then, the 6th stepped out and bought a pack of cigarettes, which caused the timer to drop by 2 minutes. It became clear that items here were paid for with time, not money. 1 minute cost 2,500 won in the square, while in the room it was 500,000 won. The 7th wanted to agree on a list of items that everyone might need. The purchase ended up being quite large, all for the sake of an exclusive toilet. By this time, everyone was very hungry. The 8th player mentioned that she had already eaten. A pipe in the room delivered 12 rations and 12 bottles of water. She had opened each one to see what was inside and used the water to bathe. Jin-Soo couldn't understand why the 8th didn't realize this was shared food, which amused the 6th player. The problem was that items couldn't be taken out of the room. Judging by the building's construction, all the rooms were connected by a single pipe. The lower floors were at a disadvantage, as there were only 12 rations, 2 per person. If the upper floors didn't share, the lower ones would go without food. The 7th asked the 8th to pass the rations down to test the theory. Being a kind person, Jin-Soo helped the 1st player climb up. Everyone was stunned by the 8th's room. It was enormous. She even had a bathtub. Despite spending money on all these items, she still had a lot of money left because every minute she earned 340,000 won. It turned out that the earnings depended on the player's number. In the lowest rooms, they only paid 10,000 won per minute, while the 8th received 500 million won per day. This news shocked everyone. Each player shared their minute-by-minute earnings. The 7th quickly deduced that the money was based on the sum of the 2 previous floors' earnings. The differences didn't end there. The room size also depended on the number. The first player had a tiny closet-sized room. He had chosen card number 1 due to his leg problems. The 8th mocked their struggles. The 7th asked them not to fight, since ultimately they all had the same goal: to play as long as possible. But to do so, they needed to be completely honest with each other. Each person should only take 1 ration, leaving 4 extra for the first player. If anyone felt hungry, they could come down and ask for a ration or eat the leftovers together. After dinner, the timer showed only 15 minutes remaining. The 8th said mockingly,
"It's not about the time. They didn't buy those things for time."
She had already guessed that time increased when they moved up and down the stairs. Even the first player with his bad leg ran up the steps, but the timer still reset and started again. That's how they discovered the hidden rule. Walking up and down the stairs added time. The 7th believed the organizers were trying to incite conflict among them, knowing that a collapse from within would be devastating. Jin-soo, exhausted from using a bucket, finally ordered a real portable toilet. That night, everyone lived according to their position in the financial hierarchy. And while some thought they were working for the greater good, the 8th was wasting money on useless junk. At dawn, everyone began physical training, preparing for endless climbs and descents on the stairs. Time continued to increase, but everyone became hungrier and hungrier. By nightfall, they collapsed into their beds without a word of complaint. The players started to worry that they had too little food. The 6th suggested dividing the tasks into 2 teams. They would have to run up and down the stairs every other day. Those who ran would receive the food leftovers. Everyone quickly agreed. Team A consisted of the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th players. Team B included the 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 8th. The 2nd player didn't want to be in the same group as the 8th, and the 1st player didn't mind switching teams. From that day on, they started working separately. One day, the 1st player found it hard to climb. The 6th squeezed his hand tightly and accused him of slowing down the team's progress in earning time. The 2nd stood up for the man, suggesting they let the 1st rest so he wouldn't slow them down further. The next day, the pain in his legs worsened. The 2nd tried to help again, but this time, Jin-soo took over for the 1st player. The 1st felt terrible that the others had to work because of him. The following day, Jin-soo discovered a pile of trash. It was the 1st player's idea. He was using his room as a storage space for waste as payment for not being able to run. Thus, the group gained a new role: a trash collector. The 7th thanked the 1st player, but soon noticed that time had stopped increasing. Then suddenly, they gained 10 minutes, even though no one was running. The 8th, tired of constantly climbing, announced that she would take a break. The 2nd player didn't like that the 8th earned more than everyone else, but worked the least. The 8th retorted that the lower floors should work the hardest since, theoretically, when they bought items with time, the upper floor paid the most because time is money. A whole day passed, and only when everyone stopped did time begin to increase again. The players assumed it was a glitch and went to sleep. The next morning, just as time was running out, the 4th player suddenly collapsed. She had a seizure. The 6th wasn't willing to waste time on her, and a fight broke out. Working together, Jin-soo ordered medicine, while the 8th laughed, realizing that their time had now increased to 40 hours. It became clear that the stair climbing wasn't what increased time. Rather, it was the drama unfolding among them. The audience must have grown tired of their stair running and wanted something new. The next day, Jin-soo decided to entertain the viewers with ASMR, but it didn't have much effect. During a quiet conversation, the 7th player admitted that he liked Jin-soo because he didn't just think about himself. Jin-soo, in turn, called him kind for not throwing his trash on others. The 7th wondered what the creators would want next, even if they found a way to entertain them. The organizers seemed to be pushing the players toward a destructive outcome, despite the promise of a reward. During the next meeting, they agreed to start sharing ideas and to correct any player who suggested something cruel or harmful. No one should know about their conversation. The 4th player comes up with an idea to create a kind of romance drama and see which couple lasts the longest, or maybe a talent show. The 7th likes the idea of a talent show and volunteers to go first, performing a flute solo using only his nose. This not only impresses the other players, but also the organizers, who add 20 hours to the total. The 7th laughs, realizing that there's no clear end to the game. Players shouldn't wait around for a huge payout, otherwise they'll be stuck here forever. The sixth doesn't understand how they can set a time limit since the prize amounts differ for each player. The first player needs only 1 billion won, which will take 75 days. Afterward, each player purchases props for the talent show. The fifth earns 10 hours, the sixth breaks tiles and gains 15 hours, and the second throws stronger punches than the sixth, receiving 17 hours. The fourth earns just 1 hour. Next, it's Jinsu's turn with his stylish dance, which gives him 18 minutes. The first player pretends to be a mime and concludes his act with a magic trick, earning 30 hours. The timer now shows 101 hours, but there's still the eighth player left. She proposes to the seventh that they engage in some adult activities, since that's her talent. The seventh declines, so she chooses the sixth instead. Together, they earn 69 hours. Jinsu feels a bit disappointed that it wasn't him, and that night, he dreams about the eighth player, hearing her whisper,
"Sleep with me tomorrow."
The first player no longer wants to accept trash, as running around is no longer necessary. The fourth suggests selecting a new place for the garbage. They can draw lots or vote during their free time. The seventh reassures Jinsu not to worry, as they'll most likely choose the first player. It's the broken window theory. If an area is already dirty, people won't hesitate to continue littering without guilt. Voting is just a way to get the first player to accept reality. The fourth wants to vote for the eighth player because she has the largest room and earns the most money. By now, she's convinced the first player to vote for the eighth as well, giving them 4 votes. Before they finalize their plan, the sixth interrupts and pulls the seventh aside to talk. He wants to vote for the third player, but Jinsu is sure that the seventh won't betray him. After the anonymous vote, the new trash collector is declared the eighth player. The fourth cheers for the third player, wondering if the winner deserves applause. The vote added 24 hours to the prize. Jinsu tries to figure out who voted for him. Unaware that it was the seventh, he asks him to forget about the vote. Jinsu avoided being the trash collector only because the first player asked the second to vote for the eighth, arguing that she has the biggest room. However, the eighth has no intention of letting them into her space, even after the vote. No one expects that the eighth will cut off their access to food and water. Everyone thought she'd give in eventually, but soon they realize they've been tricked. She locks herself in her room and doesn't come out because she has everything she needs to survive. Her time balance is still huge, and the organizers keep adding more time as a reward for her defiance. The sixth blames the fourth for the situation. She showed no respect to the higher ranks and convinced everyone to vote against the eighth. The fourth swears that if she were in the eighth's place, she'd be kind to those below her. Suddenly, the eighth approaches and hands out 4 packets of food, but it's just a hallucination the fifth player is having. The second is determined to spend all her time and end the game. The first begs her not to. Jinsu decides to save everyone, offering to collect the trash so no one starves. The fourth hugs him and says she's also willing to take on the role of trash collector, suggesting they split the task. The seventh stops them, wanting to speak with the eighth one-on-one. He successfully deceives her into forgiving the group, but for a small price: new clothes. If she had realized she could use food as a weapon, every one of them would have become her slave. They're lucky that outfits mean more to her than food. That night, Jinsu happily enjoys his meal, convinced that nothing in the world is more important than good food. At dawn, he starts gathering the trash again. The second and the first keep their waste in their own rooms. Jinsu doesn't understand why there's so much trash, as if the fourth hasn't been collecting her share, which is the absolute truth. Later, they decide to play the king's game. The fifth is willing to do any challenge. She becomes the king and orders the sixth and seventh players to hold hands until the end of the round. Next, the fourth becomes king and tells the first and fifth players to kiss. This adds only an hour and a half to the timer. The eighth becomes king and instructs the sixth and the second to fight. This is exactly what the seventh feared. In the fight, the second almost breaks her wrist, and the sixth wins. They are awarded 50 hours. The seventh asks not to set challenges that cause physical harm, suggesting punishments like using a taser for those who refuse to follow the king's commands. Jinsu calculates that the chance of getting shocked is 125% if they add 24 hours each time, meaning he'll be punished at most once a week. A new day dawns, and the second joins the game despite her injury. Jinsu is told to grope the fifth player as a challenge, but he opts for a punishment instead. The fifth pleads with him not to go through with it, but Jinsu stands firm, saying,
I'm ready.
He wets himself in fear and receives 60 hours. The next day, they have to pick a side of a coin, and whoever guesses wrong gets shocked. The second guesses wrong and gains 48 hours. The following day, Jin-Soo and the second become new players in the game. Jin-Soo fails to block a slap and gets shocked again. Late at night, the first and the second visit Jin-Soo. Being a magician, the first player is convinced that the game is rigged. He flips the coin, revealing the trick behind it. But that's not all. The next day, the first becomes king because the night before, the seventh caught the fourth cheating. She had coated the king's ball in acetone to make it slightly sticky, ensuring she wouldn't be caught. During the coin toss, the first asks them to catch the coin with the back of their hand, causing the eighth to lose. At the last moment, the sixth knocks down the seventh and knocks him out cold. Sometime later, the seventh regains consciousness. The sixth realizes that the seventh was working with other players to balance their chances, but it's boring to watch a fair game. Clearly, the upper floors should control the lower ones. The seventh notices that the sixth has already bought a new taser, and this deeply disappoints him. The phone in the square is now covered by a metal grate. The fifth suggests that it's to prevent them from purchasing weapons. The phones in their rooms should be destroyed too, Jin-Soo argues, but the seventh won't allow it. The upper floors come down to meet them. The seventh immediately announces that they must earn 24 hours a day. If they refuse, no one will get food. As a reward for participating, they will receive a coin that can be exchanged for 1 water and 1 food item. 1 coin will be equal to 3 hours. The second player wants to approach them, but the sixth points the taser at her. Jin-Soo tries to convince the seventh not to listen to them. The sixth kicks the first player and shocks the second. The first tries to help her, but the sixth steps on his leg, adding 15 hours to the prize. Jin-Soo pulls out a red ball. They are going to play a game of hide and seek. Each player must tie up one part of their body. The first chooses his hands, the fifth chooses her legs, Jin-Soo ties his mouth, and the second blindfolds herself. In this hide-and-seek game, the player loses if they are hit by the sixth. The countdown begins. The first and fifth players lose almost immediately. It's also hard for the second to hide with her eyes covered. The sixth doesn't hold back, forcing the seventh to intervene and stop him. Jin-Soo wins the game, which means he has to hit one of the losers blindly. That person turns out to be the first player. Just then, the upper floors announce a new rule. They are allowed to collect coins, but the total number can't exceed 9. Each player must write down their number. If the sum exceeds 9, they won't receive anything. Jin-Soo realizes that if everyone takes 2 coins, 1 coin will remain. Isn't it logical that the winner deserves that coin? But other players might think differently. He decides to lower his number. The total ends up being 7. All players chose 2 except Jin-Soo. He feels foolish for choosing 1. With 1 coin, he can buy just 1 bottle of water. The next day, they must guess a word using 20 questions. Each person asks key questions in turn, but at least 2 people need to be on the same page. The 5th player wants to guess, but Jin-Soo suggests thinking a bit more. He wants the second player to get a bat and fight back. The first player knows the word and catches on to Jin-Soo's plan. The second player wins, and in her mind, she starts beating the upper floors, but this is only a fantasy. In reality, she knocks out Jin-Soo instead. Days go by in a similar manner until the sum finally exceeds 9. Jin-Soo begins to think that someone will have to die for this game to end. The first player slips them notes suggesting a revolution. Tomorrow, they should go down the elevator to the bottom floor and launch a surprise attack. But they still need to survive until that day. Climbing the stairs, the 7th tells Jin-Soo,
"You'll hear it."
Jin-Soo tries to understand what that means. It turns out that the pipe can carry sound. The first player didn't account for this, giving them hope that the 7th might be on their side. At night, they begin their revolution. After a brief struggle, the 6th points his taser at the group, but it fails to fire because the 7th had removed the battery, allowing the second player to knock the 6th out. Each of the upper floor members is tied up and thrown into the pool except for the 7th. Even after all the mistreatment, the first player refuses to beat them. For this revolution, they earn a huge amount of time. The upper rooms become common areas now. They are shocked at how luxurious the 8th's room looks, realizing she bought everything using money earned through the lower floor's hard work and suffering. Jin-Soo suggests spending all her money, but their discussion is interrupted by a delivery of new food. For the first time, they can't eat to their fill. They think about buying alcohol, but first, they ask the 8th's permission to ensure they never run out of drinks. They agree on a moonshine still and snack on a few packs of ramen for dinner. After eating, they talk about how to earn more time. Jin-soo proposes taking revenge on those who wronged them. However, the second knows that Jin-soo won't do anything drastic. He's too kind for that. He could do anything he wants to the 8th right now, but he's too compassionate. This is the perfect chance for each of them to leave with dignity.
Maybe she's right. Maybe this is our last chance to leave like human beings.
Jin-soo thinks. The final night before the show's end approaches. During this time, the 8th has earned 25 billion won, the 7th 16 billion, the 6th 10 billion, the 5th 6 billion, the 4th 3 billion, the 3rd 3 billion won 2 billion, the 2nd 1.5 billion, and the first only 700 million won. But the time hasn't run out yet. Someone has somehow extended it. Later it turns out that because the 5th had a tooth pulled yesterday, time was added. There hadn't been a sacrifice, or the injury was too small to notice. It's revealed that someone ripped out the 6th player's fingernails.
Want to end the game? It won't be that easy.
The second warns. She decides to lock everyone in their rooms to prevent more harm. The game seems close to its end again. The 5th's mental condition rapidly deteriorates. She begins seeing the 8th and 4th wandering the stairs. The 6th takes advantage of this and convinces her that the 2nd also wants to untie him and that it was she who pulled out his nails. Once again, the upper floors regain control. The 6th buys a revolver and 4 bullets. They want to find out who pulled out the nails and the tooth. Since no one confesses, they decide to play Russian roulette. The 7th is shot in the leg. Jin-soo says he knows how to identify the culprit. They can buy security footage, which costs just 100 million won. It turns out the first player is responsible. He hasn't yet earned his 1 billion, and he's deeply sorry for his actions. But he wants revenge for the pain they caused him. He also handed out lemonade, which is why the 6th wanted to review the footage alone. "I'll kill that bastard," the 6th declares, ready to end the game by murdering the 1st. But the 8th stops him, causing him to fall and break his spine, adding a massive 100 hours to the total time. Each day, the 8th buys recordings of their suffering. It's quite expensive, but not for her. One day, when the audience grew bored, the 8th came up with a new plan: sleep deprivation, occasionally sustaining their physical condition. Their mental state quickly declines, and Jin-soo starts to see a series of hallucinations. To survive, the 1st tells the 4th that they can swap rooms. She still has a chance to win. Early on, he learned how to switch rooms, but it costs 1 billion won. That's why he waited for the right time to reach this sum. His family has severe problems. Besides his leg condition, his daughter is also ill. There's no money left for treatment, and she's been kicked out of the hospital. The 1st took out insurance and stepped into traffic, where the show organizers found him and offered him a way to change his life. The 4th tells Jin-soo about the possibility of changing rooms, but it's odd that the 1st is offering her the chance to pick a new room. It's too good to pass up. The problem is that there's no one to untie them. The 5th has completely lost her mind and talks to spirits, but maybe they can convince her somehow. The next day, the 5th frees everyone, but the 8th catches them and prepares to shoot. The 4th player stops her just in time.
Damn it. I should have acted sooner.
She mutters. Now all the weapons are in their hands. The 6th lies paralyzed with a broken spine, and the 8th is tied up. Although the 5th helped them, she didn't do it out of kindness. In the past, the 6th had been a famous baseball player who was expelled for gambling. His boss didn't like his performance, and the 6th ended up beating him. That man was the 5th's husband, and now she's ready for revenge. The 1st orders a room switch, but he only receives an envelope with the real prices. The cost for the 8th's room is a staggering 340 billion won, meaning their fates were sealed from the start. Now, the 1st has no money left. The 2nd suggests pooling their funds with the 1st and leaving the game, but he refuses to quit. Gathering everyone in chairs, he prepares for his final performance. The 1st climbs onto a tightrope and balances himself miraculously. His strength wanes, and he falls into the flames below. They all try to save him, but this has the opposite effect, adding 1,000 hours to the clock. Jin-soo grabs the gun and destroys all the cameras. The doors finally open, but the 1st player is already dead.
Congratulations, your prize money will be transferred to your bank account.
The voice announces. Months pass. Jin-soo spends all his winnings on banners, inviting everyone to the 1st player's funeral. There, he reveals that he found the 1st's family. They think he's working abroad because a man visited them and handed over enough money to last them a lifetime. From the description, the man appeared to be around 30 and wore glasses. Everyone immediately realizes it was the 7th. They are interrupted by a delivery man bringing a wreath with heartfelt condolences from the 6th. Once, the 8th destroyed an entire gallery that rejected her artwork. For that stunt, she had to give up all her money and ended up in prison. And with that, the show comes to an end.